Detect buyer motivation and leverage multiple offers with the best and final strategy, Main Street case study. How to leverage best and final multiple offers to get the best as is selling price for a CRE property. A case study by Vi Tran, SIOR, CCIM. The property background and summary. The Ivy Group was rehired by an existing client to sell an income-producing office property on Main Street, located adjacent to another Foothill Boulevard property the team had sold for the same ownership group the year before. The prior transaction involved environmental concerns, city review, and an extended closing timeline that stretched from an expected 60 days to roughly 6 months. Because the Ivy Group had already developed a proven relationship with the client through that complexity, there was immediate trust, but the new assignment on Main Street was hardly automatic. The building was approximately 4,617 square foot office investment property, occupied by multiple small short-term tenants. The ownership group was made up of two 50-50 partners. One owner held the title personally, while the other co-owned his interest through a trust. One partner wanted to sell, pay taxes on the proceeds, and move on. The trust side ownership wanted to preserve flexibility for a possible 1031 exchange. Luckily, the title to the property was held as a tenancy in common structure. The tenancy in common ownership framework avoided a buyout among the two partners and allowed both partners to move independently after sale. The Ivy Group's property valuation supported a market-based list price of approximately $1.1 million. The sellers preferred to test the market at $1.2 million because they could wait and sit on the property for a while. After a quiet couple of weeks without offers, three offers arrived at nearly the same time. All three initially came in below asking, around the original $1.1 million valuation range. Instead of choosing one buyer too early, the Ivy Group used a best and final strategy that preserved leverage for the seller. One buyer increased the offer to the full $1.2 million asking price and converted from financing to an all-cash purchase without a loan contingency. The result, the Ivy Group helped the seller achieve approximately $100,000 more than the team's original market valuation, secure an all-cash buyer, avoided a post-inspection price reduction despite deferred maintenance, and closed in 30 days. Earning the second deal with performance. The Ivy Group had represented the same client on the neighboring Foothill property the year before. That transaction required patience, environmental issue management, and careful coordination with the city, lenders, consultants, and buyer. The client was pleased with the outcome, but this new sale still required a full proposal, fresh valuation, updated market research, and another round of trust building. Even though the prior successful sale opened the door, it did not guarantee the next listing since one of the partners wanted to consider giving other agents a chance. The other partner strongly supported rehiring the Ivy Group, but because the partners held equal ownership interests, the Ivy team needed to demonstrate why they were the right trusted advisor for the second sale. In commercial real estate, every assignment must be earned. Long-term relationships help create opportunity, but winning repeated deals is hardly automatic. The Ivy Group needs to earn it with performance and trust every single time. Pricing above the valuation without losing credibility. The Ivy Group's research and valuation indicated that $1.1 million was the right market-based list price. That valuation was based on comparable sales and the income approach to valuation, taking into account the property's condition and the broader market environment. The sellers, however, were motivated but not highly distressed or forced to sell. The property generated consistent passive rental income, and they were willing to continue holding it until the price did meet expectations. Their instruction was pragmatic. Test the market at $1.2 million. This created a delicate pricing challenge. Price too low, and the sellers might leave money on the table. Price too high, and the property could sit, grow stale, and lose interest with qualified buyers. The Ivy Group's approach was to be transparent. The team made clear that $1.1 million was the supportable valuation, but because the sellers had time and flexibility, an aggressive $1.2 million list price could be tested. If after 3 months there is little movement or interest, the price could be reduced by $100,000 from 1.2 million to 1.1 million. That was a deliberate strategy based on the seller's position, the property's income, and the possibility that the right buyer might have a specific need for the location. A slow start in a challenging market. The market responded slowly. For roughly the first few weeks, activity was limited. Interest rates were high, broader economic uncertainty was affecting buyer confidence, and geopolitical concerns and tariffs were in the background. For an office investment property with deferred maintenance and multiple small tenants, the buyer pool was limited. This is where many sellers and brokers become reactive. They reduce the price too quickly, accept the first serious offer, or lose discipline in negotiations. The Ivy Group stayed measured. The team understood that the asking price was aggressive, but the sellers were willing to wait it out. That patience became important when three offers certainly converged at nearly the same time. Managing multiple similar offers without giving away leverage. The three offers were close in price, timing, and financing structure. All were under the asking price. All required financing. None was clearly superior at first glance. Rather than recommend the seller pick one and risk leaving value behind, the Ivy Group advised a best and final process. Each buyer was told there were multiple offers and given a deadline to submit the strongest offer they were willing to make. The team never disclosed confidential pricing or terms from the competing offers. This step preserved seller leverage. It also allowed the buyers to decide for themselves how badly they wanted the property. That distinction was critical. Rather than simply counter one buyer at a higher price and demand all cash, the Ivy team created a competitive but controlled process. The buyer who most needed the property had the opportunity to step forward voluntarily. Detective research turned buyer motivation into seller leverage. Commercial real estate negotiations are not really just about the property. They are also about understanding the people, businesses, constraints, and motivations behind each offer. The Ivy Group required proof of funds from the buyer, which showed the buyer had approximately $1.2 million cash available. The original offer, however, was approximately $1.1 million, contingent upon financing. Through additional research, the team learned that the buyer needed a building in the area for an adult autism-related program and likely needed to secure a facility to pursue regional funding. The buyer already operated nearby, and the Main Street location was strategically important because the funding and service area appeared to be geographically tied. The team also learned that the buyer's agent appeared to have a principal role in the business. That was never disclosed at the beginning, but it became part of the overall buyer profile. This information helped the Ivy Group understand the buyer's true motivation. The buyer was not simply shopping for any building. The buyer likely needed this building in this location with a practical time frame. When the best and final process was launched, that buyer indeed stepped up. Full asking price at $1.2 million and all cash without financing contingency. Protecting the seller after the offer was accepted. Getting the right offer was only one part of the assignment. The next challenge was protecting the seller through escrow. That property had deferred maintenance, including issues related to the parking lot and HVAC and an older building without fire sprinklers. The Ivy Group anticipated that those items could become negotiating points after inspections. To reduce that risk, the team included strong as is, where is, with all its defaults condition language in the transaction. The property was being sold in this existing condition with known and unknown faults. As expected, the buyer later asked for a discount related to condition issues. The seller, guided by the Ivy Group, declined. The position was clear. The $1.2 million price already reflected the property's condition, and the buyer had known what it was buying upfront prior to signing the purchase agreement. That preparation helped prevent inspection findings from becoming a price reduction tool. Vacating tenant for the buyer. The buyer needed to convert the building for its intended use. That required major interior work, including gutting the building and installing fire sprinklers. The buyer wants the building to be delivered vacant so it can perform the tenant improvements. Fortunately, most tenants were month to month, but one tenant had approximately 2 years remaining on the lease. That could have become a material obstacle. The Ivy Group helped negotiate an early exit with the tenant so the property could be delivered vacant shortly after closing. The tenant ultimately agreed to vacate without a costly buyout. Given the planned construction and disruption all around, leaving early also made practical sense for the tenant. This was another example of quiet problem solving. Seldom does a sale close simply because the parties agree on price. As shown in this sale, the sale closed because the occupancy issue was identified, addressed, and resolved before it could derail the buyer's plan. Navigating trust, title, and family dynamics. Seller's ownership structure added another layer of complexity. The property was held as a tenancy in common, commonly called a TIC. In simple terms, a TIC allows multiple owners to hold separate ownership interests in the same property. In this case, one owner held an interest personally while the other interest was held in a trust. That TIC structure gave two ownership sides flexibility. One partner, as the owner, could take his half of the sales proceeds and pay taxes. The trust side ownership could pursue a 1031 exchange with its share of the proceeds. A 1031 exchange is a tax deferral strategy that may allow an investor to sell investment property and reinvest into other qualifying investment property, subject to strict IRS rules and deadlines. The Ivy Group discussed the structure and helped the sellers understand the practical transaction implications, while tax and legal professionals would need to advise on the specific tax consequences. Had the property been owned by a single LLC with two internal partners, the exit could have been more complicated. The ownership entity might have needed to move as one, which means one partner might have needed to buy out the other before pursuing a separate path, or the LLC may have to execute a drop and swap strategy prior to selling. The two owners of this property under the TIC structure avoided a buyout process for an LLC. There was also a family governance issue on the trust side. In the prior transaction, one trustee had tried to stop the sale, even though the required signatures were already secured from the authorized trustees. Since the co-owners trust only required two trustees' signatures, the Ivy Group had already worked out that issue in the prior deal. The team was prepared to proactively address protocols for signing authority, documentation, title, and communication. The Ivy team reviewed the relevant trust documents, coordinated with title, and made sure the parties understood who had authority to sign. This prevented a known risk from becoming a last-minute closing delay. Strategic execution. The Ivy Group's strategy came down to four practical moves. First, the team earned the assignment again through market research, valuation discipline, and trust. Instead of taking their prior relationship for granted, the Ivy team performed with the highest level of professionalism and integrity for every deal. Second, the team priced the property with both market reality and seller motivation in mind. The original valuation supported $1.1 million, but the seller's flexibility allowed a controlled test at $1.2 million and eventually sold with $100,000 above market price. Third, the team used buyer research to create leverage without overplaying its hand. Proof of funds, business location, funding needs, buyer information, and motivation all inform the negotiation strategy. Fourth, the team protected the seller through escrow by anticipating deferred maintenance issues, preserving the as-is position, vacating the tenant, and managing title and trust authority. Far more than a simple listing to close transaction, it required valuation, psychology, research, negotiation, legal document coordination, tenant communication, and discipline execution. The result, the property was sold for $1.2 million, approximately $100,000 above the Ivy Group's original market valuation. The winning buyer converted from a finance offer to an all-cash offer without a loan contingency. The sale closed in 30 days. The seller avoided a post-inspection price reduction despite deferral maintenance. The property was positioned for vacant delivery so the buyer could proceed with its intended improvements. The ownership group preserved flexibility. One partner could exit and pay taxes, while the trust side ownership could pursue a 1031 exchange with its share of the proceeds. Most importantly, the sellers were able to end a share ownership chapter on favorable terms, with strong pricing, clean execution, and careful risk management. Takeaways. A prior relationship opens the door. Expertise and transparency win the assignment. Every satisfied client needs to be reassured that the broker has the right strategy for the current market. The Ivy Group never assumed the listing was guaranteed. The team earned it again. Accurate valuation matters, even when the final price exceeds the valuation. The $1.1 million valuation gave the sellers a grounded understanding of the market. Listed at $1.2 million was a strategic choice instead of a random guess. Because the sellers had flexibility, the team could test a higher number without compromising the process. Multiple offers are only valuable when they are managed correctly. Three similar offers can create confusion for leverage. The difference is process. By using a best and final strategy, the Ivy Group allowed the strongest buyer to reveal itself. The best negotiation move is not always a direct counter. Buyer motivation can be more important than comparable sales or property valuation. The market may suggest one price, but a specific buyer with a specific need may justify another. In this case, the buyer's location needs, funding timeline, and proof of funds change the negotiation dynamic. Research gives negotiation a significant advantage. The Ivy Group did not rely only on what the buyer and the buyer's agent disclosed. The team researched the buyer's business, location, funding, motivation, and relationship to the transaction. That preparation helped the seller make better decisions. Instead of demanding $1.2 million all cash from the buyer, the Ivy Group created a process that allowed a buyer a sense of control for choosing that position. That preserved momentum and gave the buyer autonomy to take charge while improving the seller's outcome. Escrow protection starts before a purchase agreement is executed. Deferred maintenance, tenant occupancy, title authority, and trust dynamics were all known risks. By addressing them early, the Ivy Group reduced the chance of surprise, delay, or renegotiation. Ownership structure can shape exit strategy. The TIC structure allowed the two ownership sides to pursue different paths after the sale. One could cash out. The other could pursue a 1031 exchange. That flexibility can be valuable, especially when co-owners have different goals, timelines, or tax positions. The visible closing is only the surface. Behind a successful closing are the unseen details. Documents reviewed, buyer motivations researched, family dynamics managed, tenants coordinated, and leverage preserved. This is where experienced commercial real estate advisors create value. To learn more, you can access for a small fee other full case studies, theivygroup.com/courses. Subscribe to the Ivy Group newsletter, theivygroup.substack.com. Contact the Ivy Group, theivygroup.com/contact-us/. About the Ivy Group. The Ivy Group specializes in commercial sales, leasing, and investment advisory across Fremont, Silicon Valley, and the Greater Bay Area. With over 100 years of combined experience and designations, including SIOR and CCIM, The Ivy Group provides strategic guidance for complex transactions in commercial real estate. When you need to sell, buy, or lease, the Ivy Group is ready to help you reach your goals. Contact us with your next real estate needs. Disclaimer: all information shared in this article and in all blogs, case studies, and courses offered by the Ivy Group are for general education only, not as tax, legal, and investment advice. Please seek professional advice from tax, accounting, legal, and other professionals. Copyright 2026 by Tim V. Tran, SIOR CCIM. All rights reserved.